Well, here I am. It is a pleasure to see you, lopsided though you are in seating. And my name is Rob Ainsley. I'm the head of music and the chorus master here, so I have my work cut out in this, one of the grandest of all chorus shows. And I'm joined, I'm very grateful, by three of our principal singers and some of our other singers in the cast as well. And the three that you're going to hear tonight are Rafael Davila, who was last here in Fanciulla as Dick Johnson, and he will be singing the role of Don José, and Nora Sourouzian, who is singing Carmen herself, and Marita Sølberg, who will be singing Micaela. So thank you so much for being here. So we stand at the end of our season in the face of one of the incomparable masterpieces in the history of art, and that is Georges Bizet's Carmen. And it's been spoken about so many times by so many different people. What can I possibly say to this masterpiece? And masterpiece it really is. It's a funny word. And let me start with the elements of the work. It's a masterpiece from any possible angle. I mean, it's an absolute parade of hit tunes that you've heard in commercials and goodness knows where else. Every possible guy. So, you know, Toreador en garde, toreador, toreador. You could certainly all sing along. There's no problem there. Yeah, but I mean, all of the arias. La fleur que tu m'avais jetée dans ma prison m'est restée. Don José's glorious flower song, but even the little entr'actes, the between acts, the little Zwischenspiels are exerted as orchestral or ballet pieces of music by orchestras all over the world. So this glorious melody, it could be a Chopin nocturne, you know. Just a solo flute and a harp. And so on. Exquisite stuff. Jeudi, for example. Beautiful accompaniment. Micaela's famous aria. One of the most famous soprano arias. Jeudi, que rien ne m'épouvante. And so on. So melodically, it's an absolute masterpiece. You know almost every melody in it and what melodies they are. And that's not easy to do. I mean, a lot of composers write music, but very few of them actually write a good tune. Wagner was not one of those people, for example. You know, but to an extent, neither was Mahler, neither was Bruckner, neither was Haydn. Sing me a melody of Haydn. There we go, you know. It's not easy. However, Mozart was one, Schubert was one, Chopin was one, and amongst the great melodists, we have to count Bizet as well. So melodically, it's an absolute masterpiece. One of my favorite elements of the score is that harmonically, with its ever-shifting shades of color and emotion. The way he uses chords is totally fresh and novel. It's really unique in this piece. So here we are. We're in the middle of the Sigadia. Carmen has been imprisoned for slashing Manuelita across the face in a fight at the cigarette factory. She's being guarded by Don José. And she's singing, and he says, "Stop talking! Yeah, you're meant to be in prison here, not enjoying yourselves." And she says, "I'm not talking, I'm just singing to myself." And I was thinking, it's not forbidden to think, I was thinking of a certain officer. And all of this thinking, this flirtation, this insinuation is painted in wonderful chords. Je ne te parle pas, je chante pour moi-même, je chante pour moi-même, et il n'est pas défendu de penser Je pense à certains officiers. Je pense à certains officiers qui m'aiment. Those harmonies are simply extraordinary, you know? Ooh, so cheeky. And then... Oh, it's just wonderful, the shifting sort of flirtation that she can achieve. But sometimes those harmonies are passionate, tearing us apart. So the final duet. Oh. They almost make you nauseous, they're so good. Delayed cadences, something the critics hated, those delayed cadences. So harmonically, it's a masterpiece. But if I'm just to go on, the orchestration is an absolute masterpiece. So here we are in the final duet, Don José and Carmen. Basically know what's going to happen at this point, and there's a moment of silent confrontation. And in that silence, you can hear the timp and the pizzicato, and you can hear their heartbeats. And then 4 muted horns. And he says, you don't love me anymore. And then rich clarinets, bassoons, horns, ripping your heart out, both harmonically and orchestrally. And a single clarinet, she says, no. Je ne t'aime plus. And then the whole strings. Orchestrally, every bar is a stroke of sort of genius there. So there's 3 of the main elements. Atmospherically, the way he uses atmosphere and dramaturgy is extraordinary as well. So here we are. She's just sung her opening habanera. And she sidles her way through the men of the chorus, and she stops in front of a certain officer named Don José, and she sidles up to him with her theme, which is the fate motif. It's also her motif. Here she is sidling. She gets closer and closer. And then she throws at his feet a flower. And then all of the women sing about how fickle lover is from off stage. L'amour est enfant de bohème, il n'a jamais, jamais connu de loi. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. S'agit de mesure prendre. And then this soaring string tune, which changes Don José's life forever. And then here's Carmen again, sidling away, slinking away. How's that for atmosphere? So in every way, melody, harmony, orchestration, atmosphere, all these individual elements make it a masterpiece on their own. But they combine to create 2 central characters, a whole host of characters, but 2 central characters that for me are some of the most vivid and true and real people that ever step on an operatic stage. You know, I can count on perhaps one hand the number of real people in my life that I feel I know as well as Carmen. And Carmen is both a total enigma and completely fictitious. So it's just extraordinary how real he's able to make these two people. It is an absolute masterpiece. So there's some of the reasons, these individual elements. But it takes more than the sum of the parts to make a piece really fly. And this piece surely did fly. So why then is it the most beloved, the most performed masterpiece? What makes it a masterpiece? Well, a good way to make sure that a creation of yours is going to stand the test of time, be shrouded in mystery and majesty, and performed evermore, is to die either while you're creating it or shortly afterwards. And that's precisely what Bizet did. It's one of the great tragedies of music, especially of French music and of French opera. He died after the 33rd performance on the 3rd of June, the day after, of certain complications, and he was only 36 years old. It's one of the great musical tragedies. Who knows what would have come after this particular piece? But it wasn't a masterpiece at first. It was really a bit of a flop. Not a total flop, as Bizet felt it was. I mean, it ran initially for 36 performances. There were some half-empty houses. Then it came back the same year for another 12, so 48 performances in the first year. That's not a total failure. You know, Madame Butterfly was polled after one. If Manchurian Candidate goes on to 48 performances this year, I'll be delighted. There's an absolute success. Massenet and Saint-Saëns commended Bizet. They said he'd written a masterpiece, but the critics didn't like it. And they didn't like it for all of the reasons I've just told you it's a masterpiece. They said the melodies were trite, they said the harmonies were confusing and that you couldn't sense when the cadence were coming. They said the orchestration's like Verdi and Wagner, this orchestral noise that's covering up the singers. So it wasn't successful. In fact, it left the Parisian boards and it didn't come back for several years later. It had to be deformed around the world first. A man called Girard came in and he orchestrated all of the spoken dialogue, turned it into a grand opera, added some of La Lysienne suite as a ballet, and that's how it was known for much of the first half of the 19th century, as this grand opera. And it's only now we're getting back to the melodrama that's much stronger. You know, the minor characters are more fleshed out in the spoken dialogue. And something about the grand opera sort of, it proceeds in fits and jerks rather than sort of having a good flow as the spoken dialogue lends it. So there we are, not a hugely successful piece, but premiered in 1883 to a tepid reception at the Met, and now about 130 years later it's had over 2,000 performances, well over 2,000 performances just there. That's on average about 20 a year. It's quite some going, isn't it? So it's a masterpiece, absolutely. But I think one of the ways that masterpieces get created is, I like to call it the blank canvas syndrome. I think if an artist has complete and utter freedom to let their imagination go wherever it wants, sometimes that's a little too daunting. It's a little tricky to know where to start. You can lose focus along the way. And by having constraints on the creative process, making it a little bit more difficult for oneself, that's when I think a lot of the world's great masterpieces happen. So take Michelangelo, for example. David is carved from a single block of marble that has one terrible flaw in it. And two people tried to carve the block of marble before him, but it took his genius to come along and say, no, I can do that. And the reason David stands in space in that arrogant, haughty, beautiful, lithe way he does is because Michelangelo had to carve around, at a certain transverse section, around the floor in order to make it stand up and not fall apart. Same thing with the Sistine Chapel. Obvious constraints trying to do that, but some of those most impressionistic panels, say the depiction of chaos on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, comes because, first of all, he was in absolute agony from having spent 3 years with his neck like this in dim light, but also every panel in a fresco has to be painted in one day. It's called a giornata because it's painted directly onto wet plaster. So after 3 years of this, you can see the haste and the pressure he was under to complete it. And that's why the depiction of chaos relies so much on instinct and is so impressionistic without sort of great detail involved. And there we have these masterpieces. The flying buttresses of Chartres Cathedral. They're there to hold up the walls so that they can be filled with glass and light can come in. Again, it's creative problem solving. And that happened here as well. So what are the problems? What did Bizet want to put on the stage, and what problems did he encounter? Well, it was written for the Opéra Comique in Paris, and that is the family theatre. And the family theatre is where gentlemen can take their lady friends for a wholesome night's entertainment. They can enjoy it. It's like going to, you know, Broadway or something, seeing your favorite show. You don't want to be challenged too much. It's definitely got to be PG-13, you know. The matinees, you want to bring the kids as well. Very strict sort of social and moral codes about what was to be presented. So when the Opéra Comique commissions Bizet, he gets together with his librettists, Henri Meillac, Ludovic Halévy, and they find a tale that excites them, that they want to write about. And that tale is Prosper Mérimée novella, Carmen, written from the point of view of Don José. Actually, most of it's a retelling from when he's in prison awaiting execution for Carmen's murder. And it's definitely from his point of view. And the characters that interest Bizet are Carmen and Don José. Now, if we look at the rest of the characters in this opera, they all fit quite neatly into the opera comique tradition. You have, you know, the posturing, arrogant, swaggering baritone who's terribly attractive to women. Voilà, Richard Olazaba, one of our escamillos there. Yes. Belcore, we all know that character. We have sort of soldiers and gypsies, not unusual. A bit of a frisson that they were drawn from the proletariat. So, you know, that cigarette girl chorus would have been sort of a little exciting. But it wasn't until after Act 1. Act 1 was a huge success. It was after Act 2 that things started to get a little hairy. Act 3, stony silence. Act 4, not happy with the premiere audience. So the rest of the characters, Micaela, the innocent, sweet soprano, the two comic gypsies, Remendador, Don Caire, Morales, the young general, they're all stock opera comique characters. The difficulty for Bizet was getting Carmen and Don José, the two interesting ones, past the opera committee. And that was headed by a guy called Adolphe de Leuven, who actually resigned in 1874. So disgusted was he that they were going to go ahead with this particular plan. So there's the team. There's Bizet, the two librettists, and his first Carmen, a lady called Célestine Gallimarié, and she was a mezzo-soprano, and she was firmly in his camp, a great supporter of him producing this vital, dangerous character as she was meant to be. She was not only in his camp, she spent a lot of time in his bed as well. She was having an affair with him at the time, and she was a definite mezzo-soprano who liked to get her way. So here we are, a problem. I've got to get it past the censors. Same way that Mozart had to get The Marriage of Figaro, the Beaumarchais play, past the censors to create this masterpiece. How does he go about doing it? Well, let's start with the character of Carmen. Let's talk about why this is an interesting person. Carmen is not your spotless soprano. She's a femme fatale of the first order. She's a heroine, but she slashes another lady across the face with a knife. She uses her womanly, animalistic charms to get freedom and her way at any cost. She spits in the face of death. She would be lewd and vulgar if it were not for her sheer courage and fatalism in the face of death. They're qualities that mask that vulgarity. And she is an awesome creation, one of the sexiest, most passionate characters ever to set the stage. Let's take how he introduces this particular character of Carmen. Well, we have that wonderful shifting harmony, first of all. She says, "When will I love you? Oh, I don't know. Maybe never, maybe tomorrow." Two keys, maybe never, maybe tomorrow. And then her little theme, but not today, that's certain. And then this very famous aria, which I've described before in these lectures. It's a Spanish rhythm. Immediately, not French, we have Spanish passion. It's hypnotic. And for 4.5 minutes, that bass note never stops sounding. It's an ostinato, it's a ground bass, a pedal point. But it's not a melody. It's just a descending chromatic line. That's hardly a melody. It's a bunch of notes that anyone can sort of pick out on the piano. And that line keeps descending towards that bass note that keeps sounding. And when it teasingly gets close, it flies back away up to the top. And when it does settle down there for just a moment, she does a portamento back up away again. So musically, what he's creating is this depiction of hypnosis Latin passion in this undulating rhythm, and teasing of this D note. So Nora, would you like to show us how Carmen's entrance music sounds with these shifting harmonies and this glorious Latin rhythm underneath? The chorus tenors are about to say, Carmen, tell us which day you will love us. Carmen, dis-nous quel jour tu nous aimeras.
Oh, je vous aimerai. Ma foi, je ne sais pas.
But the genius is that he carries on with that D pedal point later in the opera. So in the middle of the seguidilla, there's that D again, but because she's in prison and she's trying to escape, she starts on the D natural rather than teasing towards it. Perhaps the D stands for Don José. I don't know. Oui, mais tout cela s'ennuie, et les vrais plaisirs sont à deux. Donc, pour me tenir compagnie, j'emmènerai mon amoureux. She keeps coming back to the D. Mon amoureux, and she's trying to fly, il est au diable, and then she flies away. Je l'ai mise à la portière. She plays around. Mon pauvre cœur, très console, but always coming back. Mon cœur est libre comme l'air. J'ai des galants à la douzaine, mais ils ne sont pas à mon gré. Hear the D? Voici la fin de la semaine, qui veut m'aimer? And back to the D. Je l'aimerai. Option again. Qui veut mon âme, il est à prendre. Vous arrivez au bon moment. And then she just plays. Je n'ai guère la temps d'attendre, car avec mon nouvel amant. And finally, when he thinks he's got her, she disappears into a totally different key. Près des remparts de Séville. Absolute sort of musical genius to use that sort of D pedal point that she keeps teasing and coming back to all of the way through the score. It's a very clever idea. So there's Carmen, the enigma, one of the greatest characters ever to step on the stage. And that's someone he had to get past the censors. But they needed mitigating. They needed other characters, more in the opera comique tradition, to temper these strong characters, this particular committee. So let's talk about Escamillo. Now, Bizet hated this matador's music. He hardly appears in the novel. He gets sort of a couple of paragraphs towards the end. He appears in the bull ring. He's not a matador. His name is Lucas. And Bizet said they wanted orgia, which is sort of a French word for merde. They wanted orgia, and that's what I gave them. But the music is anything but merde. It's full of sweeps of the cape, and confidence, and bravura. It's a fabulous tune. And yes, perhaps the character is trite, but the music is not. So the censors get their posturing, swaggering, masculine hero, rather than this distorted tenor hero that we're going to meet later. But the wonderful thing is that by adding Escamillo and giving him a greater role, he makes Carmen more flirtatious, more licentious, because her focus is not solely on one man. She's all about free love now. So he's satisfied the senses, but he's also deepened the character of Carmen. Very clever trick. More characters. Let's go Don José. Don José. He starts as an honest soldier. He would be a perfect tenor hero. But over the course of the next acts, he spends time in prison between Act 1 and Act 2 for releasing Carmen when she was meant to be kept under guard. Act 2, he becomes a deserter. Act 3, he's like a caged animal. He's become a gypsy. He's a bohemian. He's a vagabond, practically. And by Act 4, he's absorbed all of her fatalism, all of her resolve, but in the worst way, and he becomes a cold-blooded murderer. Now, this is an anti-hero if ever there was one, and getting this past the censors was extremely difficult, the character of Don José. Well, he has to temper that in various ways. And one of them was to say, okay, if he's going to become a gypsy, we'll make the gypsies comic characters. And indeed, Remendado and Don Caïra are comic. They have music like this, sort of like the Three Stooges. Mon cher monsieur, nous allons s'il vous plaît quitter cette demeure. Vous viendrez avec nous. C'est une promenade. Consentez-vous, répondez camarades. There we are, sort of comic, swaggering, insinuating music. But by making them comic characters, they start to mock the very idea of authority. At this point, the General Zuniga. So by introducing comedy, which the opera comique wanted, he's also threatening authority. And he makes the piece still more dangerous. It's a compromise on his part, but it strengthens his game. It strengthens the central characters by contrast. And perhaps the greatest addition is Micaela, who does not appear at all in the Merry May novel. And she is precisely what the censors wanted. She is the spotless soprano. She's very innocent, she's very chaste, she's very sweet, and all of her music is practically by Charles Gounod. In fact, at the premiere, Gounod, during her aria, said, "You stole that from me, Georges Bizet." He thought it was his own air. It's quasi-religious. It has none of the passion. It's exquisitely beautiful, but very cerebral, very French in a way, very restrained and elegant. So I'm going to let you, Marita and Rafael, perform the opening duet of Micaela and Don José. And this, you will see, not only gives the censors their sweet, chaste soprano, but it also gives Don José a greater fall to start from. By placing him, by showing us what he loses in Micaela, what he runs away from, his fall is even stronger by contrast. So Bizet wins yet again by giving the censors what they want. So here's Marita and Rafael, and this is the opening duet. And you can see just how refined and restrained the singing is. She's bringing news of his mother, his aging mother at home. She's attended church with his mother, and she's bringing him a letter and a little kiss on the cheek, nothing more than a kiss on a cheek, and she hardly dares give him that. So it's terribly chaste indeed.
Parlez-moi de ma mère. Parlez-moi de ma mère. J'avoue que sans fidèle messagère, cette lettre. Une lettre. Et puis un peu d'argent pour ajouter à votre traitement. Et puis
Isn't that exquisite? But kind of boring, yeah? That's the whole thing about it. It's meant to be absolutely beautiful, but very staid, very chaste. He actually instructs her that when she gives him the kiss, it has to be bien franc, it has to be very sincere, and maternel, it has to be maternal as well. There's absolutely no passion there at all. So, they get their spotless soprano, but at what cost? By making Don José more of a raving monster by the end, and by making Carmen seem so much more sexy and passionate and Latin when she finally steps on the stage. It's a stroke of genius by contrast. So there he is, working with his management, working with his censors, but still producing greater depth of character in the two figures he really cares about, which is Carmen and Don José. So constraints making a masterpiece. So what happens, I want to finish this little segment by showing you what happens and the sort of fireworks we get, at least initially, when we put these two characters who lie totally outside the opera comique tradition together on stage. They actually almost never sing together until the very end. You don't hear their voices at the same time. They're always sort of at loggerheads, Carmen and Don José. So here is their duet in Act 2. So she's escaped from prison. He's spent some time in prison himself for releasing her. And he's gone to find her at Lilas Pastures Tavern. And here she is, and she does a slinky little dance for him, a little castanet dance for his solo delectation and pleasure. And in the distance, as this is going on, we hear two offstage trumpets. And they are calling him back to the barracks. It's l'appel, it's the roll call, and they're sounding the retreat, and he has to go back and do his duty. And she thinks this is ridiculous. I mean, how can you be bound to something like duty? I mean, don't we live a life of total freedom here? I do this dance, I sing, you know, I sung, I danced, je chantais, je dansais, and now you scuttle off like a little coward. She calls him a canary for two reasons. First of all, canaries are yellow, he's being a coward. Second of all, his uniform would have been yellow as a soldier. Back then, it's like young Werther's always got yellow pants on as well. He would have been yellow in that respect as well. She says, take your jacket, take your saber, go away, it's wonderful. And God rest her soul. I remember my mother being exactly like that, you know. I'm sure she's looking down with glee, but, you know, she would not listen to good rationale and logic. She'd just throw every possible barrier in my way. And here's Carmen being exactly like that. Don José is trying to make her listen to reason. He says, you know, I've never met a woman like that. Jamais, jamais femme avant toi. No woman before you did these things to me. And she repeats his exact words back to him in a different key, almost like thumbing her nose. Je souffre du planter, you know. It's incredible just how frustrating and annoying this incredibly sexual being is being at this point. He's left with almost no choice at all. So here is the first part of the duet between Carmen and Don José in Act 2. I'm not going to make her dance, but I will play the trumpets.
Au quartier, pour la paix, j'étais vraiment trop belle. J'étais vraiment trop bête. Je me mettais en quatre et je faisais des prières. Oui, je faisais des prières pour amuser monsieur. Je chantais
So before they sing the second part of the duet, I think one of the central themes of Carmen is freedom. And that's what I've been talking about with Bizet. Freedom has a price, it has a cost, and it's the way we use freedom that can often produce great results. So Bizet is compromising when he produces this piece. He's compromising to get things, the things he cares about, past these censors, past the management at the Opéra Comique. Utterly unsuccessfully in the end. The public was sort of disgusted at this piece. It took a few years and he never saw the enormous success it became. But his vision was true and it was real. So now they're going to have make-up sex, as it were, at the end of this duet. They've had their little tiff, their little argument, and now she's going to, by giving him no choice, she's at liberty. She has freedom to reel him in. She's cast the hook, and now she's going to reel him in. And she's going to start another little sort of hymn to liberty. Actually, this is the beginning. This choral finale at the end of Act 2 is so strong. It's one of my favorite pieces of chorus music. It's almost like the beginning of the Moulin Rouge. You know, it has all of that sort of feeling of jazz hands and big ensemble singing, this hymn to liberté. But the thing that it possesses that a lot of West End Broadway musicals don't is taste. Great taste in this particular finale. Exquisite taste, you know, the French renowned for taste above all else. And this is definitely evident in this piece. So she's going to start this sort of, she says, oh no, with this tritone, you don't love me. And then she says, but if you came away to the mountains, if you read the time we could have, and this, what starts as just a single pitch, slowly loosens up into this sort of slinky rhythm that finally becomes a full-blown sort of hymn to freedom, and he has no choice, and he actually sings with her in duet at the end, and you know that he's lost. She's got him, and away they go. So this is the big hymn to freedom, the beginning of the big hymn to freedom, La Liberté, at the end of the Act 2 duet.
Oh
how lost he is. Well, Carmen it's one of the most viscerally exciting of all pieces, and I'm deliberately teasing you with just these few small extracts today. You'll have to come to the theatre to see them really sing out. It's a huge piece for the chorus, and you know, the finale, the final duet between the two of them, I've seen countless times in the theatre. I've done Carmen's in Cuba. My first ever opera was as a boy in the kids' chorus. I've accompanied a silent movie with the soundtrack of Carmen. I have done a film noir Carmen. We've all done various types, and it can, as you can see, this one is our Boogie Nights Carmen. This one is set in, it is set in the 1970s, this particular production. So it's updated perhaps 150 years from its original setting. Another time of freedom and liberty and all of that sort of stuff. So it's certainly at liberty for that. But that final duet, which was again a compromise. He said, oh, you know, this tragic death of the heroine on stage, which really upset the management, it'll be okay because I'll temper it with lovely fanfares and all of this sort of ballet music, and you get all of that in the bullring off stage. But I cannot watch that final scene without feeling physically nauseous at what's going on. It is so real and so visceral. I love this opera perhaps above all others. It is an extremely concentrated, there's not a wasted note in the entire score. You're going to have a great time. You've got plenty of opportunities, 10 opportunities to see it. So get your tickets, get your friends to come. So we're going to have a little discussion. Think of some questions you might like to ask. There's a lot to ask about in Carmen. So we'll take a little coffee break, eat some cookies, get the sugar high going, and then we'll chat to our three wonderful singers. Please thank them again for their beautiful singing. Okay, you all wired up? I've been herding my singers and now strapping them in for our final portion of the evening. So it is a real pleasure to have these three extraordinary singers with us, and we've thanked them already for their wonderful singing so far. And now I want to talk a little bit about the piece I've been asked. As you can see from the costumes over here, this is not Mummy and Daddy's Carmen so much. So the original locale of Carmen is 1820s Seville. And this is also in Seville, but updated about 150 years to another time of freedom. So Franco, Spain, and we're in 1975 is, I think, the time period that we're talking about. And as I said, I've done a variety of Carmens in various different locales. So I've done one in Cuba, for example, because the habanera actually comes from Havana. It was a dance brought over by the West African slaves, by the Spanish conquistadors. So that's where that particular rhythm comes from. It's full of sort of Latin rhythms. The seguidilla is a Castilian folk song and dance. But I think you can probably tell them a little bit more about this production. I don't know if I was hoping Michael would be here. So I know the concept of freedom is sort of la liberté is very central. So who would like to tell us a little bit about how this production works in the 1970s, what it's set? Anyone?
Actually, it was set in 1975, okay, which is the year that Franco died in Spain. So that's why we call it Boogie Nights Carmen, because of the...
Because Marky Mark is playing Escamillo.
But also it's a time in Spain where the people were... we can bring back the theme of the libertad, no? the freedom, trying to switch between the system that they had with Franco, and then into the monarchy came back, and the whole pueblo.
I have no idea.
The whole, all the citizens, were trying then to fit into this different. And it's what happens exactly to Don José in this particular story. I don't know if you might add something.
Well, actually, we're smuggling everything that was not allowed in the Franco time, which was magazines.
Pornographic magazines.
Yeah, so if you're careful with your binoculars, maybe you will be able to see. Cigarettes, obviously, and all those things that were not allowed to do, to have. So we are rebellious already by smuggling all those goods to the people to Spain. So we are trying to get the new wave of living.
La vie bohème, la vie bohémienne is such a theme in opera. I mean, obviously, la bohème. But gypsies abound, you know, so Azucena, there's always sort of some fascinating gypsy off in the background throwing babies on fires. And, you know. They do that in opera, they really do. But this idea of freedom and a life outside our social norms is one of the reasons people go to the theatre, is the idea of getting outside yourself and seeing these exotic people on stage. So here, La Vie Bohème is represented by the ubiquitous hipster, and a 70s hipster at that. So, I mean, updatings of productions happen a lot these days. Santa Fe just did Breaking Bad, Carmen. So they were smuggling meth, I think. Wow. Something entirely different. And of course, it's Santa Fe, so down near Albuquerque, Breaking Bad country. But I think there's, you know, updating and resetting a production. You know, I'm sure Carmen's been done on roller skates on the moon before with some crazy German director. It can be controversial, you know. But it can also reveal new truths about the piece. So what are your feelings on updating productions in general, and particularly this one? What do you think we're going to learn? What's going to be more relevant to us, and what don't you like about it as well? Whatever you'd like to say.
If I may, I do think Carmen is a masterpiece, not only of what you did all describe in the first part, but it's also because it's such a present story that all of us had once at least lived, meaning falling in love with someone and being in love with another person, or being left from another person. And it's something that we can all rely. We see Carmen and we say, oh my God, yeah, I want to be her, I could not, I could, or Micaela. It's really present, and that's why I think it's possible to make travel the story. What's here more important in our production is really the dichotomy between freedom and freedom and control. And it's exactly what's happening in the 1975. Freedom against control, against this, not the fascist regime that he had, but almost. And freedom. And that are the two poles. And that's why in this production it really, really works. It's not only about love and death. It's really about freedom. And that is really Carmen. I am more than a sexual femme fatale. I am because you guys want to see me like that. But I'm freedom, and I'm fighting for this freedom until my death. And he is the control freak.
In real life too. Yeah.
So that's why it doesn't work. That's why it's still working in present time, in 30 years from now. Or, and that's why she's also my counterpart. I am freedom, but she's everything what's not freedom, like being the good housewife, praying, being the good woman, the good, and that is really working. His counterpart, if I may say, is Camillo. Also freedom. I fight when I want, I go to a bar when I want, I have the women that I want. That is the type of Don Giovanni somehow, which is really not the type of José. So in this production is really even more about this Franco and Spain. It's about freedom, and that is really actual even now, freedom.
It's I think the stronger the piece, the more possible it is to move it. If it's sort of a minor masterpiece, or you know, one of those obscurities that we do from time to time, resetting it, you lose a lot. But Carmen, Marriage of Figaro, that sort of thing, Yeah, I'll happily see the abduction from the Seraglio somewhere other than Turkey. It is, you know, it's not a problem. I think the piece is so strong, and it contains such universal themes that seeing it from another angle, it can only open your eyes.
And still, we're setting it in Seville.
Yes.
In the 70s, but in Seville. So, you know, you still find, nowadays, I just came from Spain, you find gypsies in the streets. So you can relate to the story nowadays that a soldier would get in love with a gypsy and what all of that could get to.
Absolutely. So we're talking about freedom, and we have Marita over here, and she is Michaela, and she is everything that sort of isn't freedom. But I think it's a tough role, Michaela. It can, I mean, you're up against one of the, you know, greatest female characters in opera, but it's also a good role. Like, Michaela often gets the largest round of applause for her aria. It's such a great aria, you know. So it's quite, and the music is so beautiful all of the way through. So, talk to us about how you managed to keep Michaela a strong character, not a weak character. And also, this piece, it leaves very open the idea of how gender is portrayed. Are these characters proto-feminists? Is this a sexist opera? How are the genders balanced? What's the role of women in this opera? What's your role, and how does that sort of fit in? What do you think?
Yes, I think this opera has the Carmen and Michaela as archetypes of women, as you also can compare them to the whore and the Madonna in the female part. It's very, and I think that's why this opera is also such a success. It has characters within, which is so archetypical that you always will relate to them. And I think, for Michaela, she's also in the 70s in Spain. She's still suppressed, and I think it's more a question of religion than there is of gender here and feministic things. And I think a housewife with taking care of female qualities within a home is still can be very strong within herself, and even try out borders to see. I mean, to see what qualities and what values does count somehow. I think. And she also, I mean, crosses her own border just to reach José from a different place where her village is.
She's incredibly brave.
Yes,
you know,
she's brave.
She goes into the camp of these smugglers and these gypsies and these. They all carry, you know, guns or sabers or whatever it was. They're dangerous people, and she, on her own, you know, with the guide, she turns up to tell him that his mother is dying. She's a very brave woman.
Yeah.
So
I think it's more a question of the suppression of religion for Michaela, rather than female, not female, or how to say, female different qualities here.
yeah.
Of course, there's archetypes, but within that there's room for different ways of viewing it.
Yeah, I think Bizet is very careful to do that. You know, she is. Yes, she is sort of the Madonna. She's terribly holier than thou in her sort of musical choices and that. But she's also very strong, and she's very real and sincere. And yes, perhaps it's sort of a platonic love, and they're headed for marriage. But she's ardent about it. Whereas Carmen, I'm sure you would disagree with her being labelled a whore. You know, she could be, as I said, she could be vulgar and lewd, but she has qualities. She too is very strong, very fatalistic. And she's not a whore, you know. She genuinely likes this guy, at least for a little while. But she is true to herself. She'd rather die than not be. She's been called actually a female Don Giovanni, but I think she's more morally upstanding.
I think that Carmen also is a character that every female today in modern days will definitely rely to themselves within. I mean.
What are you saying?
Oh yes. As I would myself, I would love to sing Carmen. The role is fantastic.
It can be some way a surprise.
It's amazing.
The high note, and I have all the applause. I think really people are afraid of a woman that is so strong. I don't think that people are afraid of a whore, and that's why Carmen is not a whore. She's a strong, imprévisible person. We cannot know what she will do, and that is liberty. And she knows that, and she's able to see people. She's able to calculate others, but other people are not able to know what I will be doing. And this mystère that she's creating is what makes Carmen a femme fatale. And it's not because she's like the one opening the breast and everything. That's not it. She's really going for her liberty. She's really loving, actually, Don José. But we have certain level of loves. Sometimes when we're teeny, we are like totally in love until we found the other guy and we say, oh my God, that one was like, okay, forget it.
This is the real love.
Until the real love
speaking from
comes,
experience.
you know? So I really do believe that Carmen loves 100% José until something happens, until something is not working. And there's a lot not working between us two. So
Until also when he began to control her.
That doesn't
She
work at
cannot
all.
stand that.
That's impossible. That's impossible.
So that's the ladies. Let's talk about the guys here. Let's examine the genders. So we have Escamillo, and he's sort of your high school quarterback. Yeah, he's not terribly deep as a character. A little bit trite, a little bit facile. But he's confident. He's terribly polite. So, you know, when there's the fight in Act 3, he's terribly mannered and elegant. It's Don José who's rude and coarse and sort of suspicious. And he's probably not the sort of guy you necessarily want to marry, but you definitely go out with him for a couple of weeks, Escamillo. I mean, you know, give him a whirl. So I quite like Escamillo. You know, I don't think he's the orger that Bizet said he was. I think he's the dude that he's portrayed to be. Whereas Don José, I don't know. I don't know what I think about Don José. What do you think about Don José, Rafael?
Well, as you mentioned in the novel, everything is seen through his perspective. So he's the central character in the novel. And that's because he's the one that you see being transformed during the whole story. Just like you mentioned also Trovatore. You say Trovatore, Manrico, no, he's not the tenor, is not really the central character. It's Azucena, because then it goes all the way from what happened when he was a baby and she threw the baby into the fire, all the way until after they're dead. So I think it's the same thing with Don José. What we don't get in the opera that we get in the novel is the reasons why he became a soldier. He committed murder, and because of that, one of the choices he was given was to become a soldier. So you see this very controlled, very nice guy at the beginning, but you know there's something just hiding behind that image that you will be. I'm able to develop through the opera, and you will see it at the end of the opera for sure.
Yes, it's interesting. The novella's in 4 parts. As I said, I was forced to read it in French in high school. And we're only getting part 3. It's the only part that the opera concentrates on. And Carmen's actually married in the novel. So actually, both of the characters are much less likable in the novel than they are in the opera, even. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he was tempering all of the way, Bizet. These are pretty racy figures for the French then, but the novel was even more extreme. And as you said, it's really about Don José. Mm-hmm. It's really about his fall from grace. Yes. And you're immutable. Carmen doesn't really change. She stays true to herself and to her values all of the way through. I never know who is to blame. Whose fault is it?
His, obviously.
His. Yeah. It's always the guy's fault, isn't it?
All right.
You'd agree?
Sure. We all agree. And also, you know, it also is the same thing. I know this might be a question you might ask later, but it's the same thing vocally. It comes from, usually they say that this opera requires 3 different tenors. A lyric tenor for the first act, a lyrico spinto for the second, and even a dramatic for the last. And you develop that through the opera. So for us, it's very, very helpful and also very, very healthy, because then we go from singing lyrically, as we did at the beginning, the beautiful duet with Micaela, and then it becomes more aggressive for the last 2 acts.
Actually, it's the same for Carmen also.
It is?
It is, yeah.
You don't even have to warm up. You can just sort of, you know.
Yeah.
The piece
you warm up
does it
into the character.
Actually, it's
going the other way would be completely impossible. But sorry to interrupt.
No. It's a very tough piece to sing. It's a very tough role to sing because stylistically, his downfall is painted as well. So that first thing is almost like a Fauré chanson in a way. It feels that restrained. Whereas the end is true verismo. You know, it's like a piece of Mascagni or Leoncavallo. It's really, or Giordano. Or, you know, it's very, very big singing, very strong, huge orchestra. So totally different roles. And a lot of tenors crash and burn at one or another end of the role. Whereas we're very privileged to have someone who can manage it all with artistry and grace. Yes. So do we have any questions? Is there anything you'd like to know about Carmen for our esteemed panel? Yes, sir.
I've seen Carmen several times, but I've never been able to resolve why Don Jose is the only one in that village who doesn't know what she is and who she is.
Fair enough. It's a good comment. I don't think he is from that part of town. I think Micaela and he are, you know, he's been stationed there. So he comes from further afield. I can't remember in the novel. She is unknown to him. She might be known to the characters in the cigarette factory and to most of the other guys. But this troupe that's there, you know, the guard changes. We find there's this wonderful little innuendo, this harmless innuendo about the la garde montante, la garde descendante. So the rising guard and the guard that's going down. So it's the changing of the guard is going on, and I think Morales uses it as a little bit of a sort of innuendo as well. But I think the soldiers are changing rapidly, and they're just not as familiar with all of these people, whereas, you know, a lot of the local guys hang out at the cigarette factory because they want to find these girls. So I think it's clearer in the novel, which is a great read. I do recommend reading the novel, The Merry Me.
At the beginning of the opera, he explains to Zúñiga what goes on in the tobacco fabric, because he's been there longer than Zúñiga, but not that long. I mean, he hasn't been. He just came, and actually, I think this is the guard from the mountains. So we're returning from the mountain, from guard in the mountains.
This use of, say, the cigarette factory in general, and people from the working class, was also kind of extraordinary. It was okay to have gypsies and it was okay to have soldiers, but they always came from the aristocracy. So the use of the proletariat, the working classes, was very much a new thing, and that's one of the things that we categorize as verismo opera. It's like Il Tabarro of Puccini. It's the use of the working classes, real people, real reflections, not just sort of gods and kings and queens that we could sort of enjoy the story. Real human passions, and this piece is credited with beginning verismo, at least in France. You know, so that's one of its themes. Any other questions? Anything else for our panel? Yes, sir.
I was trying to comprehend why this, with all the positive things we've said tonight, the features and musically on and on, why did it not be incredibly successful from the beginning? Were there weak singers? Was the opera reworked?
It was reworked all of the way through. So this score is the 1960 critical edition, and it contains a ton of music that was gotten rid of during the rehearsal process. So it's a bad score, but it's the only one we have. You know, the other one is even worse. It's the grand opera. No one really knows what a definitive Carmen is. So that habanera was written by the soprano and Bizet during rehearsals. She didn't like the initial aria. We think of it, you know, these masterpieces just happen. This folk song evolved over the course of rehearsal. So it went through many different formats, Carmen. Why was it? I think it was too new. First of all, it wasn't what the public was expecting. And when the public has expectations, they like to be satisfied. And their ears weren't open, you know. It took a few years for it to come back to the Parisian boards, and then it was hailed a triumph. It also took Bizet's death. You know, Gounod hated it. He said, you know, he's stolen all of my music, it's terrible. And then he spoke at Bizet's funeral, and he broke down in tears, and he said, we've lost one of the great geniuses, and Carmen is a masterpiece. So it doesn't take long. Yeah. And dying is a really good way to change people's minds, as I said. But yes, it's, I think it's shocking. I still think it's shocking. I still find the central characters difficult. I don't know if I like them or not, but they're fascinating and they're very real. And I think that was too much for the audience. I mean, why do you think it didn't work? Why do you...
As you say, we don't expect what we have. We will expect that both of them get married and have kids and are happy.
Yeah, I have to say, the Opera Comique proposed that all of this could be solved if Don José and Carmen simply got married at the end. Yeah. Can you imagine? Imagine if Bizet had let that happen? Yeah. But it was proposed by the management.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's that.
This is not Doris Day.
Isn't there a version that ends like that?
There probably is.
La Tragédie de Carmen?
Yeah, I think it's different.
Yeah, they go together and then they leave.
Oh. Terrible. Marita, what do you think would have put off the audiences of the day? What was difficult for them?
Well, that she was a strong female character. I think that was too much to handle. And that's probably why she dies in the end, unless it would probably not be a success at all. I don't know. That's how to suppress her when she is so strong. I don't know. It's just a thought I have.
The romanticism time to be really this passionate love and death, and love and death was really the time of, so that somehow went to the movement of that period. But I think really we will expect that the soprano will be the center, and she's the example. Is that what we learn to be the good person? The belief that we pray, the person that believe in the person that we love, and she's the prototype of what we all did learn in our childhood, and we would have expect. I think that opera just make a point 1 for Micaela and 0 for Carmen, and somehow no one gets a point.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean the genius is that. So one critic called Carmen the epitome of vice. And this man goes from being an honest soldier through deserter, vagabond, and cold-blooded murderer in the end. And there are central figures. And at the end of the opera, we sympathize with both of them. He makes you, as an audience member, sympathize with a murderer and a dissolute woman. And that was morally unacceptable and is still shocking to us these days. Yes?
He's sort of trapped by his own fate. He's on this constant, this railroad straight to hell.
Oh, yes.
That's what's happening. And she's free, but she's ultimately, she goes, she dies as a result of his single-minded dissent.
And her sort of strength in the face. She'd rather die than not be true to herself, you know? She will not sort of...
We're critiquing the story, and I think of opera as the story could be so that the genius of the music, I would have thought would have trumped some questions about the story. You started off talking about the genius of the music. It seems like that was overlooked.
Yeah, well, as I said, they thought that the orchestra was being blown in a sort of Verdi-Wagner direction. They didn't like that. Yeah. They found the harmony difficult. The harmony is extraordinary in this piece. It really is complicated. I always play wrong notes in Carmen because I misread the chords. It goes in places you don't expect it to go. And they said, you know, it just tires the ear. You're always waiting for a cadence to come, and it never comes. Yeah. That's what they said. You know?
Maybe now for us in the 21st century, we are used to that, and we can appreciate that. But back then, maybe it was too different for them, too innovative.
The French composers were not really friendly each other. They really liked to kill in the back the others. And I don't know what story it was, but there were some statues of all the French composers. And I think it was Berlioz said, and he did put all of them down, so that they had this competition between them, Gounod, Berlioz, Massenet, Fauré, and Bizet. They were not really like friendly, happy family. They really, you know, and maybe that's why they realize, oh my God, that's a masterpiece, and they try to, as much as possible, to put down this opera. Maybe because there was not an happy family.
Yeah, Massenet sent Bizet, after this sort of failure with the booing and Bizet leaving sort of distraught, they think his depression might have contributed to his illness and that kind of thing. Massenet sent him a note afterwards saying, "Congratulations, such a marvelous success." Tchaikovsky did see it sort of on its that year and its reround, and he did think it was just one of the greatest pieces ever written. And it is. It really is one of the best. Okay, well, we've gone a little over time. I think we've chatted a bit about Carmen. Thank you so much to our three singers for being with me tonight. We're in for a very colourful Carmen, as you can see. I'm going to steal those pants, actually. I have a club to go to on Saturday night. Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you.